título... A título de apresentação, Andrea é professor de Estética na Universidade de Bolonha, no Departamento de Arquitetura, é membro do Programa de Doutorado de Arquitetura e Culturas no projeto da mesma universidade. Ele já ensinou em várias universidades italianas e estrangeiras, Florença, a Universidade Técnica de Berlim, na Inglaterra, tá? E desenvolveu colaboração científica com várias universidades como Dresden, Complutense de Madrid, Lisboa. Então, Andrea é um personagem internacional bastante viajado, né, e preparado. A área de atuação dele é eminentemente estética, mas ele tem uma leitura bem vasta no campo das teorias da comunicação, e o que ele vai fazer para nós hoje é uma fala onde ele vai mais ou menos comparar 3 paradigmas, 3 maneiras, né, de trabalhar a comunicação, sendo que são todas, eu creio, bem próximas dos nossos interesses aqui no PPG-Com. De atmosfera, o pensamento do Wilhelm Flusser e a teoria da mídia alemã com Friedrich Kittler. Então, agradeço muitíssimo a boa vontade e disposição do André e estamos aí ansiosos para ouvir o que ele tem para falar.
So thank you so much, Eric. Yes, it's a pleasure anyway to have an exchange with you about the subject. I'm not so used to speak such as theory of communication theory, even if I have deepened some subject inside this field, and that's why I have chosen 3 authors, but mainly I will speak about the first one, Wilhelm Flusser, but I try to make a short comparison, and more than a comparison, to reflect on their philosophical background in order to some conclusions about maybe with some value more general for the field. Yes, for Wilhelm Flusser, I have chosen the keyword groundlessness, so something which could allow us to go behind and before, maybe surely before he became an important figure in media theory, since Bodenlos, that's the German word, what's happened? Bodenlos, that German word for bottomless, or without ground, or precisely groundlessness, is a word he used to give a title to his autobiography. At the start he wrote, but published only after his death. So Bodenlos, what does it mean? It means, as a German expression, groundless, for whenever one feels lacking the ground under one's feet, when the foundation is taken away from something or someone. So something which is in German also Abgrund, tief, of abysmal depth. So something you cannot stand on, is the predominant trait of the human condition in the world dominated by apparatuses. Defines the strategic junctures of the analysis of the world of communication. Yes, as I told, the autobiography by Flusser was called a philosophical autobiography, and the title is precisely Bodenlos. He described the several steps of his life, starting from Prague, where he was born, Flusser was born in Prague, and Prague was, before the World War II, was a particular place very specific for the idea itself of the lost of ground, emotional tonality of the absurd life, rootless, meaningless, and so on. He was actually someone who had to leave. He left Prague at the arrival of the Nazi troops in 1939, but Prague, you know, very famous as the city of Kafka, Franz Kafka, was a place where he, and this is important for the development of his intellectual life, the city had made him doppelsprachig, that is bilingual from the beginning. He spoke Czech and German and added some other languages, transferring into Great Britain, so here in London, but later, and as you maybe know better than me, he stayed for a long time in Brazil and also used Brazilian Portuguese as his language for writing and teaching, and as well as later when he came back in Europe in the 80s, French, since he established himself in southern France, in Provence, for his last years. So the fact to leave this place, which was an happy place for him, but also something which whose metamorphosis in a brutal aggression happened very soon, he was pushed to face death, as he writes in his autobiography, death and evil, and haunted as an haunted animal, he was reduced to a purely biological life. He speaks of himself as a man, German man, not personal definition. One could translate it in English, one. He speaks about himself as one man in German. So he had to live devishly, as he wrote, diabolisch leben, thinking to the conservative principle embodied by the devil in his, so to say, profane theology. So a man who found himself belonging to the nowhere and to the nobody, and brought his own situation back to a radical interrogation, and he set himself the task of searching for a deeper meaning in this fantastic, as he writes, collapse of reality. So, what I'm trying to emphasize is that in his intellectual mindset is very important, this biographical route. So he had to choose, he had to decide on the void of everything lost yet before. This is an existential, one could say, condition who influence very much his, also his theoretical steps. I try to sketch briefly for you. He, according to his first Brazilian book on language and reality, Língua e Realidade, in 1963, he thought to language as the reality, and to its rules something must be accepted as the structure of reality. Languages, in his conception, starting conception of the language, languages are given as multiplicities, each language representing a whole cosmos, and the reality of different languages become relative to each other. So what becomes very important in this frame is the problem and the activity of translation, to translate from a language to another one. He interpreted in a very peculiar way this idea of translation as destruction and rebirth of the intellect, in which polyglottism appears as a kind of multiple life of the intellect itself. Just to say, he refers to, let me try the point, he refers to a Czech word that is prekladat, the Czech word for translation, literally means reassembling a pile of fallen boards. So the very idea of remake an order, reproduce an order lost, that's quite different from resistance from the word, German word übersetzen, that means to jump to the other edge. To übersetzen or translatio, Latin word, it's a passage from a point to another one. So, to another one. So he developed a conception. I don't insist on the detail, just to give you an idea. 3 kinds of language. The first one, which is interesting for him, inflectional languages, consist of elements grouped in situation and define a word made up of elastic but constant elements that obey rules that are reducible to a logic. And these inflectional languages are those ones who give, where the possibility of translation has made possible the conversation between languages and with it the origin of Western civilization. So the point of Flusser was to jump between languages. He described his condition between German, Portuguese, French, English, and so on as suspending, in hovering, in jumping between languages. There, it seems he has found the place of his own paradoxical and improbable ground, Boden, as a result from his autobiographical reflection. Speaking of Brazil, he wrote, "The cast of Brazilian nature was at bottom the search for soil to thus answer this question of vital importance. We found ourselves in suspense about languages, in Schwebe über den Sprachen." Suspense about languages seems to have at least for a little bit overcome the nothingness. So the meaning of his Brazilian experience was precisely that, and asking himself, what am I in the course of translation? He answers, I am something that jumps without thought from one self to another. So different languages, different identities, different selves. I am a chaotic heap of debris, something, an amount of ruins, and that is about to reassemble itself into a new self. So the attempt he made through the language. So briefly, he transformed this new idea, new insight of the language and translation, a result of his personal research on a more general level. So we will see briefly the passage to the theory of communication, media theory, and which has also an institutional side, as you probably know, that the institutional framework he made in Sao Paulo, Faculdade de Comunicação e Humanidade. So his theory, that's communicology, the theory of general theory of communication. Just some words on that. Human communication, he writes, is an artificial process based on artifices, inventions, tools, and instruments, that is, on symbols organized in codes, and human beings do not understand each other in a natural way. So on, it's of conception of man descending from that, only in the sense of his non-naturalness, man can be called, human being can be called social animal, zoon politikon. So the very famous definition. I skip the detail of the theory, codes, symbols, purpose of human communication, to make us forget the meaninglessness and meaningless of the context in which we find ourselves. So just to follow this existential route of his theory till inside the very idea of communicology, the meaninglessness of our life in front of the perspective, the fact we are condemned to death. So the borderless, the groundlessness arrives till the very core of his theory of communication. So the idea of negantropy, communication as negantropic, that means accumulation of information against nature's general tendency toward entropy. The opposition, very influent in his theory, between discourse and dialogue. Discourse is something, a process in which the sender sends an existing information to the recipient, and dialogue, a process in which the different orders of partial, uncertain, and question seek through the exchange of information to reach a new information. So this is the creative side of communication. People engaged in dialogue, philosophers, artists, and essayists have a specific existential connotation too. Men who doubt, who seek the solution of doubt through openness to others, therefore they are creative men. In dialogical life, oh, yes, good idea, thank you. Dialogical life is the influence of, we can speak about that if you have any interest later, but the influence of Husserl and Martin Buber on this specific approach. They helped to form, through dialogue, the original core of his thought, and something even normative in the meaning of the word, that the key to define the utopian aspect of his vision, a technical implementation of communicative structures of networked dialogue. The definition of his utopian side. So finally we can notice that the dialogue represents the outcome of the long meditation on the groundlessness that has been attempted so far to contour in the last 18 minutes. From communication to media theory, yes, it's the pace very close, thanks to this distinction, to its application to the society. Flusser found himself disposing of a transition from the problem of communication to the problem of media theory. The distinction allows also him to a tight critique of forms of discourse that program behavior. Discourse programs behavior. The totalitarian drifts of one-way forms of communication in which one can receive but not transmit, the risk of deresponsabilization that they entail. So his main goal was expressed in the formula opening technological media to dialogue. One of the reasons he has been considered one of the prophets of the internet era, even if he died just at the beginning of this era, is that precisely that he thought that what's at stake in communication is the reciprocity, so open to reciprocity, the communication. He even emphasized phenomena like radio receiving phone calls in the 70s, so as a symptom of this trend to be enhanced. Finally about Flusser, one could, as someone has already noticed, for instance, Andrea Stroll, in his essay on Flusser como pensador europeo, he emphasized a kind of moral ambiguity in Flusser. Flusser accepted as a way to become human again the projection whereby machine will assume control and humans will be reduced to fingertips and brains. At the same time, he warned us of the new barbarism associated with the same development. So, kind of oscillation or ambiguity in his attitude towards technical media. He was excited about the possibility of electronic images, but criticized writing as much weakened code and complicated. Yes, he made also some kind of prediction which have been denied by the further development, for instance, by the fact that writing should have been enhanced instead of erased, so by the technological media. So after his death, has been talking about Gutenberg's revenge, so the fact that writing has come again, more and more texting and telephone and so on, smartphones and so on. Even his approach to post-history as the end of history connected to the end of linearity included in the writing itself, something which has put in doubt in the years later. So all these trend lines need to be revised anyway. What other people writing on his work, they have emphasized the fact, I have tried also to contour in my presentation, that much more than his detailed statement about technological development, what's at the core of his problem is the tension between loss of meaning and need of meaning. So this kind of tension is one of the, and in the remaining 8 minutes of my presentation, I very briefly try to summarize why I've put Prusa side by side with Friedrich Kittler and the atmospherological paradigm. The first two, Kittler and Prusa, have been seen as going to the same general, towards to the same general direction, that is a post-human vision of the world. Post-human, it's a very interesting essay by Bernd Seeger that Eric told me about, I have read recently, tried to define a turnover in the mid of the 70s, beginning 80s, in German media theory as a passage to a humanistic vision of communication, so criticism, alienation, and so on, toward a post-humanistic paradigm. But let me refer to these authors by this point of view. One, it's very difficult to accept today this point that's clearly a description of what happened as the final point of arrival of this reflection on the media theory. Why? Because, no, because, no, well, welcome. Because, so to say, first, the post-human means many things. Many implies a lot of meanings. For instance, it implies a non-anthropocentric vision of the world. That's good. For instance, including our relationship with nature and other non-human animals in our vision. That's very important as a post-humanistic step. Different European and American, US approach by this point of view. But in this kind of author, for instance, very interesting description of the way media magnetize, he used this word, their epoch, by Friedrich Kittler, who made a very interesting, I have not the time to detail on that point, but we can come back later, very interesting description of different epochs of European or in general world history, referring them to the dominant media of the time. But this is something who looked at humans as depending more and more from apparatuses independent from their will. I can quote maybe for you the concluding statement of this very interesting an essay by Kittler. I translated many years ago, actually, into Italian, but he wrote this kind of summary of his thinking about the media at the end of the 90s as an entry for a handbook, 15 pages, where he summarized very well his thinking on this subject. He concludes with this sentence: without reference to man's communication techniques have outgrown each other until, in conclusion, an artificial intelligence advances into the cosmos to intercept possible intelligences. So this prophecy has been realized. The artificial intelligence is there, and so my reflection is still the time to go in the same direction of this mainstream, or we are in the time to make a stop and a reflection in order to find another way out from this transferring of the power of our life to apparatuses, to devices, to the communication media, and especially last time emerged as a very important subject, artificial intelligence. So, just a question, I have no answer about that, but let me quote the last point I have put in my presentation, my title, that's Atmosphere. Atmosphere, a paradigm, very interesting. His background, the philosophical background, is probably it has many roots, but the first one at the beginning of the last century who wrote about the idea of an atmospheric unity of places was Georg Simmel in his philosophy of the landscape. But in general, developed by the two figures I've mentioned, Gernot Böhme, who also developed aspect to use it as a technique to build, to make rooms, spaces, architecture, design, following this vision. But I have evoked it in my title, and we should deepen, if you want, the atmosphere as paradigm, the fact that something has so to say, a center, a common element, what German calls Stimmung, harmony, tune, a way to feel the same, independent from the subjectivity of the people involved, produced by something else outside them, so to say. This idea has maybe inside itself as a general philosophical theory, and this refers mainly to Hermann Schmitz, the new phenomenologist who worked a lot on this subject. A main reference to the feeling of the body. So come back to the body and put the body of people at the very center of a theory of media could be maybe the way to go back from this enchanting word, magical word, as McLuhan called it, of the media as something which forms our life, so to say, and find as a point of reference our feeling bodies. So the direction towards which points this atmospherological paradigm, we can detail later if you want, is precisely that, of the felt bodies. So bodies as living matter, not as Körper, but Leib, the living body. That's the idea to put again in the center, which also converges with another main interesting direction of thinking in German philosophy of the 20th century, that is philosophical anthropology. This distinction is very important in the conception of Helmut Plestin. So the feeling body as a way, a direction to come back from this transfer of sovereignty, one could say. So not going back to old paradigms, to the idea, old ideas to restore again, but come back to this point of view in order to change our perspective on the media. This is the main philosophical hint I can put in this context of the media studies. That's not my one precisely, but I have had some exchanges with thinkers who also include this. So, thank you. "43 minutes, so a little bit more."
Thank you, Andrea. Opa, desculpa. Thank you, Andrea. Nosso microfone sem fio não está muito legal, então estamos usando isso aqui. Se alguém quiser fazer pergunta, eu vou fazer uma primeira pergunta, depois a gente abre. Se alguém quiser fazer em português, a gente traduz, não tem problema. So, I was thinking about the connections that you try to establish in your talk. Because for me, it's very clear that there's a straight line going from Flusser to German media theory and the notion of atmospheres. So it's a connection that goes from like the 70s to digital media to contemporary times. And I think there's this notion that connects everything that is precisely atmosphere. Because even Flusser, I think especially his book on gestures, talks a lot about Stimmung, Gestimmtheit, the relationship between gestures and emotional states, the connection between subject and object, landscape and subjectivity. So it's a return of the body, like you said. It's at the center stage of contemporary thinking on media. And something that I think is really interesting about what's going on, especially with German media theory, is the fact that the very notion of media has been broadened. Because, according to people like Bernhard Ziegler, Friedrich Kittler, lots of different things can be media. Like a boat can be media. And I think that's very rich for us who study media. This, whole different notion of media. Maybe it would be interesting for us if you could elaborate on this expansion of the notion of media. Not only the body, right, but like even a door can be understood nowadays as a media, as a way to connect to different, phenomena, reality. Like in the case of gestures, the connection between the inner state and the external world.
Yes, agree about this criticism to the. We collect or no? I answer the question. Yes, this criticism about the idea of media, that this trend in German theories of media has taken, I agree, too wide, too comprehensive. At that point you can explain everything in social life as a medium. Even commodities become media, or everything is media. And I also agree with your idea of Flusser as containing also, Flusser thinking containing also this kind of perspective coming back to the body. In general, one could say that Flusser contains a lot of alternative paths coming out from his thinking, which are not always self-contradictory, but anyway, he can help us to understand. He was not chaotic, but very energetic, very full of ideas, developed in many directions. So he contains some statements and their opposite at the same time in his thinking. He entails both of them. That's the point about Flusser, in my opinion. Anyway, yes, the atmospherologic or paradigm is a very comprehensive one all the points you have mentioned are there, but also others. Just to mention something I have focused in my presentation, one could summarize this with the idea of discovering new principles to enhance the quality levels of our life experiences, including the subtle nuances you can experience in your life world. So the very idea to refuse to reduce everything to a quantity, to come back to qualities, and to follow the felt or lived body instead of the matter of the Körper. So focus on situations. The idea to focus on which consist of states of affairs, programs, and problems. So something which can be overcome only through or when it becomes the object of a prosaic linguistic explication. So not of a general theory, not of a quantitative definition, and this is also this is important to understand that this is not a psychologism, something referred to in inner states only. It's a way to externalize the affective sphere. That's also interesting. That's why it can be manipulated and become object of making kind of atmosphere making that I'm more suspicious about, but anyway, that's more Böhme than Smith, the fundamental, the founding of the theory in Schmidt hasn't this kind of idea. So a paradigm which invites people to know how to expose profitably to and to better understand the authority of the atmospheric feelings and collective situation of our spontaneous, not intentional life experience. This is so I think that this a good direction, yes, which can also rescue a lot of material from Flusser's elaboration. I agree completely. Dois microphones. Doesn't work.
Hello.
See,
Yeah.
works.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for everything you say. And I'm a film researcher, and I'm very fond of films that work in that space of the in-between that you talked so much about, the Flusser experience. And it seemed to me that part of experience of the writings of the Flusser is exactly on that migrant experience. It's something that's between this loss of meaning and need of meaning is that what German media call the atmosphere is kind of the space between what you feel and what you have to, and what's the message it's going to be when it's delivered. And it's exactly life and experience of the subject that it's in its way. And for me, that is precious. And international artificial intellection,
AI.
EIs, thank you. Lost of translation here, sorry. And for me, what it lacks is just that experience of that that lack of curiosity from the translation of an information to another is something that's seems to me that's regulating what EI is today. And do you think that, I don't think that Flisser and Kittler they thought about the media and the technique that could fill in the gaps, but the gaps is as important as the message. The gaps of the message is as important as the language. And how do you think we can solve this? How do you think we can overcome? Or it's not a matter of overcoming it, or we just have to deal with this? Or should we overcome that lack of curiosity? Because ChatGPT just translate everything, not knowing if you're speaking in Afrikaner or Italian or English or Portuguese. And for the artificial intelligence, that's not something. But even we know that gap, that atmosphere that builds the communication, it's important.
Well, an epochal question, obviously. Our present is deeply determined by this kind of technological frames. Now, first point, migrants you mentioned. Yes, I've skipped that part of the description of the genesis of Flusser's theories, but obviously he also insisted on this origin from the painful, both painful and creative situation of the migrant. So he has to inhabit the homelessness, to be without home, without a country as your home, and so on. But also, thanks to that, he wrote, the migrant can become a window, I quote, through which the natives can see the world. So thanks to him, they open their mind. That's a very important point. If you want to transfer this suggestion to inhabit the homelessness, to be not at home everywhere, so kind of disease, we could also think to a way to cope with this kind of new environment so strongly influenced by technological implementation, like, for instance, in artificial intelligence. Obviously, not in the fact itself of translation. This could be simply a tool. Use ChatGPT to translate. We cannot overcome the fact that the machine is a stranger to everyone who puts information in it. So we have to remind that this place where we are not at home is something which should put, to express this in a poetic way, to feel ourselves more close, to share more, to be, even the fact we are going, all of us, to die should be a way to understand our lives, something that should feel us closer than at such a distance. So the common destiny of humanity is at stake there, and the fact that you share this condition more and more general for everyone in the world of homelessness should be a way to let us find the path to share, to go somewhere together, not simply to be dominated by impersonal mechanisms. This is what can we overcome? I don't know. We'll try at least. Another German philosopher I have like so much, whose name is Hans Blumenberg, wrote a lot of things about also shipwreck. That's a subject for Flusser too. He wrote an essay about Nachdenklichkeit, that means pensiveness, to go on thinking. That means even if all of us are condemned to the shipwreck, nevertheless we have to try even if it's an illusion. We have to try again and try again. He was speaking precisely of the meaning, the fact to find a meaning in our life, to cope with the great problem of our life. So even if we are sure all of us will die, we have to try to become more closer to share the common destiny of humanity in another way than simply be dominated or exploited or marginalized by impersonal mechanisms. So this could be a way, yes, an ethical address, not epistemological analysis of the connections we have with, but maybe not so bad anyway.
Alô? Okay?
Well, thank you for your talking. It's quite inspiring, and
I would like to ask you, Andrea, if you heard about the idea of transcreation, or if we could try say in English, it was proposed by Haroldo de Campos, a writer, a Brazilian writer, and the idea is quite interesting because it tries somehow explain how hard is the idea of translate something. It means, I think it's somehow quite connected with what you were saying about one of the big issue for Flusser. It's about the idea of, actually it's impossible to translate. You always try to rebuild, you try to recreate something. And so I'd like to ask you if you've heard them, if you knew about this idea, and it could be quite connected with what you were saying, and maybe it could be useful to think and go deeper about what you were saying about this big issue for future. And the other one question is about methodology. You talked a little bit about it, and I think media theorists, German media theorists, usually they are not really in dialogue with methodology, but somehow they are thinking and probing some questions quite similar. And so I'd like to listen to hear from you a little bit more about this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this question. Two questions actually. The first one about translation, yeah, very interesting. I just know a few Haroldo Campos. I'm sorry, I had a friend who was a great specialist, a British scholar of Haroldo Campos, Bernard McGurk. He wrote a lot of that, but he has also spoken to me a lot, but I don't know enough. But about the problem in general, you mentioned, yeah, translatability or untranslatability of something between languages. Obvious, one has to recreate a rebuild, as you said, tradire, that means to be a traitor, or translating. It's Saint Jerome also wrote this from the beginning when he translated the Bible in Latin. That's a very old problem, actually. My point of view, in a nutshell, is that languages are obviously also different languages, as also Flusser also writes that different languages are different words. You open to different words. The idea that's a romantic idea from Herder to Humboldt, the idea that language implies a vision of the world, and you make different words using different languages. But a kind of negotiation. I don't think that we live as in the postmodern world of Jean-François Lyotard. He spoke about îlot linguistique. Language games are not connected to each other. The language islands, no, you cannot go from one to the other. I think that one has to find a pragmatic way in order to make two languages coping each other. Obviously, they don't overlap entirely. Only a part of them overlaps with the other one, but this can allow us to understand a bit of the others. So I think that, as also for Flusser, the point is to maintain the transition between the languages as the main focus of this task, not to choose one or the other one, to stay in suspension, he wrote. That's a good idea, in my opinion. You cannot solve entirely the problem, but you cannot renounce to it. Both another kind of antinomy, one could say, in Kantian terms. So you cannot overcome this opposition. You have to live between the languages, between the opposite terms, between enthusiasm for new technologies and sober awareness of their risks and so on. Not choose one line against the other, apocalyptic or enthusiastic apology. You cannot choose, in my opinion. You have to stay there in between. At the other point of McLuhan, yes, I think that they try to overcome this idea, this German theories, this idea of to fall again in the magic. That they don't agree with that. They have chosen a way to describe in. I think that's not also sometimes explicit relationship they put with McLuhan theories. They have opposed to that a description of the way it functions, the way it works, the relationship with the media, forming our, so to say, forming our way of our conduct of life. The Weberian word, but good to apply here. Lebensführungen. They are very influenced by, more than influenced, formed. They try to describe this, not a kind of re-enchanting of the world, thanks to the media. That's maybe even imagination, but in this perspective, becomes a way to be inside a paradigm, not something disrupting it, even imagination. So this is. And obviously, Flusser escapes this. He goes away from this. The wonderful, I've received yesterday the Vampire Authorities, this Baroque imagination, something, a model in order to understand better ourselves, like the extraterrestrial entities that Peter Zendi discovered in Kant's critique of the pure reason. So the idea to use the fantasy at work in another way completely more interesting, my point of view, that this reduction to so tight categories that we found in this kind of very interesting. Niklas Luhmann wrote about him as one who has understood the right approach to the way media determine their epochs, but I think it should be better to take it easier at a certain distance, this tightness of categorical definitions. But my point of view.
I think that's it. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was
Thank you. Thank you to you.
Se alguém quiser tomar um cafezinho. Para vocês saberem, Andrea também, ele fica no Brasil até o dia 5 e o pessoal da literatura que trouxe ele, né? Eduardo Lumos, João César aqui da UERJ, e o João César está propondo que a gente faça conjuntamente um convênio com Bolonha e a partir daí a gente tem algumas trocas. Deu para perceber, eu acho que vários interesses, né, dele no campo da estética estão próximos das nossas questões e autores, né, aqui do PPG-Com. E o meu trabalho, do Vinícius, da Patrícia também, um pouco, tem muita relação com o que a gente tem feito aqui na área de comunicação. E é uma interface que para a gente é interessante, né? Então, é isso. Obrigado. E
Eu também.